Welcome to another broadcast of Philosophic Perspectives with Arthur D. Schwartz on the Artist First Radio Network. All past broadcasts are archived. Visit artistfirst.com. And now out to your host, it's Arthur D. Schwartz.
Why, hello and welcome to the show again, another edition of Philosophic Perspectives. Well, there's something extraordinarily significant about the penchant that many of our contemporaries have, quite probably a majority of them, for lampooning and condescendingly dismissing conspiracy theories or conspiracy theorists. After all, the term makes it clear that the belief is a theory and not an established fact. But merely siding with a conspiracy theory makes you a kook, or someone who isn't quite living in the real world. And the attitude of mainstream media is especially biased. Typically, the subject is brought up simply as a vehicle of derision or ridicule. Now, on the Philosophic Perspectives radio show, however, the only objects of derision are dogma and intellectual rigidity. But it must also be noted that a conspiracy theorist can also be as dogmatic about his or her position as a closed-minded debunker. Here, our only concern is edging closer to the truth, and that requires a sense of pluralism and an appreciation of the diversity of perspective. My interest in conspiracy theories is twofold. Clearly, the possibility of secret collusion in the power centers of industry, government, science, academia, and the media should be a concern to anyone. However, I am also interested in what I think of as a corruption of history. And if history is itself a victim to conspiracy and other forms of suppressed knowledge, then what does it say about our reality? A reality that would be perhaps turned upside down if the truth were to be revealed. Orwell's famous remark in his great 1984 novel, he who controls the past controls the future, and he who controls the present controls the past, encapsulates my sentiment on this subject. I am especially privileged tonight to have as my guest an engaging writer and emerging thinker in the fields of conspiracy theory and other forms of what he calls underground knowledge. James Morgan is a New Zealand-born actor, writer, producer who currently resides in Sydney, Australia. The book that we will focus on today is The Orphan Conspiracies, which he co-authored with his father, Lance. So let's begin. All the way from Sydney, Australia, I am happy to have James Morgan on the show. How are you, James?
Arthur, good to be here. Thank you for this opportunity.
Oh, well, it's really, we talked the other day, and I'm just very excited to have you on the air. I have long been fascinated by conspiracy theories. I've gone into it somewhat more recently, but reading through your book and the depth of knowledge and the broad perspective and the unique insight you have is really something that's going to make for a great show tonight.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a loaded term, conspiracy theory, isn't it?
It is. Well, like I said, it's one of those words that can spark, like I say, generally speaking, derision. I mean, I can't stand it when you see every time it comes up on TV or a UFO situation comes up, you can just, it's like ha ha ha, as some kind of it's a joke, and it's just dismissed. And I think that's all part of the conspiracy to keep conspiracies, in the closet, you might say.
Yeah, and I think the other side's true as well. What you noted in there, that there is a lot of dogma in the conspiracy arena as well. Mm-hmm. So it works both ways.
Oh, it certainly does, and I think that is a good point, because let's face it, if you run across a conspiracy theorist and just believes in all conspiracies, and that becomes his own kind of a dogma, his own kind of ideology, religion, whatever you want to call it, because that indicates a certain frame of mind. I would say conspiracy dogmatists have a lot in common with, debunkers and other dogmatists. I think actually what you're getting down to there is the love of ideology and so you see
Absolutely.
the world with blinders on. When I think people like yourself, and after talking to you, I do feel we share a lot of similar views. It's about just wanting to know the truth. What's going on?
That's it. And someone's got to ask the questions, and they're not being asked in mainstream media.
Absolutely. And so, why don't you talk a little bit about? Well, I mean, your book, the one specifically, the Orphan Conspiracies, is very interesting in and of itself, because actually what it is a non-fictional expansion of your fictional work, which in and of itself is probably a subject for a whole other show. But you feel free to bring it up. I know another thing that you told me is that you mostly. You and your father, your co-author, you've been doing fiction up until now, and now you're branching off into nonfiction.
Well, my background is mainly in film, and then I've got into novels. My father is a journalist, ex-journalist and newspaper editor. We co-authored a series called The Orphan Trilogy, which was a series of conspiracy thrillers. And in that, we explored all these themes, but there was twofold reason why we wrote this non-fiction spin-off, The Orphan Conspiracies, which really, first one was we kept getting people writing to us wanting more about this, the different topics we'd researched, and certain conspiracy theories on whether it's banksters or the way wars begin, or whether the way minerals are controlled in third world countries, all of these things. And of course, it's just, in the end of the day, it's just a novel. So the second reason is we wanted these ideas to be taken more seriously. So I myself particularly had never imagined writing non-fiction, and it's something that's just taken off. And off this book, we've now got, as you mentioned, we've got an underground knowledge series, which is all the topics in this particular book, the Orphan Conspiracies, are being spun off into extra books, and that's how high the demand is. We've even got translation deals for some of these books into other languages with publishers in foreign markets. So it's what started out as a bit of a sideline interest is turning into the main game, and it's more just, I think it reflects that people are thirsty for underground knowledge.
Well, I certainly am. And I hope that someday everyone would be thirsty for underground knowledge, because
yes.
If there is underground knowledge, it would be, in and of itself, a reason to focus on that, because unlike other knowledge, it might be more hidden. And, of course, devious, because underground knowledge means, right, that someone is keeping it underground.
Yeah, it could be. Sometimes the public is not ready to conceive of certain ideas. It could be that. So that's almost a conspiracy by accident. Or it could be something, let's take something like anti-gravity propulsion, so UFO technology. If that exists, then it could be that that's being purposely withheld. So a lot of these things are a bit of everything. I don't tend to believe in a grand overarching conspiracy or any one group controlling. I think it's many things, and sometimes it's just a conspiracy by default.
Right. Well, your book is a very broad book. I mean, you have 29 chapters, which is, there's overlap, but basically 29 conspiracy theories that you cover in the book. And they're all interesting, but of course, I think some are more central than others, I think. I'm sure you would agree with that. And I'm just wondering if you might want to begin by talking about, just a few of the main ones that you think are really the, the underpinning of, the broader conspiracy, or less, if you feel that they're all kind of all equal in importance.
No, I think there are some that dominate the book and carry over into other theories and ideas. I would say false flag terrorism, the history of governments around the world creating terrorist events, and within that would be a big one would be Operation Northwoods, which in 1962 all the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff said, we're going to fly buildings into planes, we're going to bomb cities, which included Miami, Washington, D.C., and we're going to blame it all on Castro. And that sounds quite reminiscent of 9/11. And even if 9/11 is, the official story is true, there's a lot of other terrorism happening that I happen to believe is false flag terrorism, but that can include just turning a blind eye to an event. It doesn't have to be, setting up the whole of 9/11. It could just be that certain elite elements of government know about terrorism coming and they allow it to happen. So once again, it can be not the conspiracy you imagine. It can be somewhere in between. And then beyond false flag terrorism, I'd say the element of the Nazis and how they were developing very advanced technologies, and when the powers that took over Germany that shared it, so the Soviets, the Americans, and the British as well, when they saw the technologies, and this is on the record on BBC articles, declassified documents, when they saw these technologies, the scientists that saw that just were gobsmacked. They couldn't believe it. And this led to a now declassified CIA program called Operation Paperclip, which involved bringing 15,000 Nazi scientists and psychiatrists into America post-World War II. And this had all sorts of ramifications. Some of them, Werner von Braun, he was the head of NASA. A lot of people know that. And he was a Nazi scientist. But what a lot of people don't know is it led to these Nazis that were brought in undercover and had their names changed and their criminal records changed or wiped clean. They were then in charge of the mind control programs, things like this. Plum Island. So germ warfare continued. So some of the Nazi programs they didn't actually end with the defeat of the Nazis, which is still, some historians would disagree with that, but the evidence is really mounting that some of it leapt over oceans and carried over into other countries, including the Soviet Union.
Right.
And that's a big overarching theme because a lot of the ideas like Orwellian, the things that he predicted, George Orwell in 1984 about how the future would be like this mass surveillance, that we would have no privacy, and those ideas to me sound very fascist. So those would be false flag and what happened to the Nazi technology and the scientists would be a big one. And then on top of that, I would say the suppression of certain inventions within the military, which are on the record to varying degrees, and which I've been fortunate enough by knowing certain. Some of this is just by circumstance, and some of it's by whistleblowers seem to be coming to me these days, and I seem to be attracting the right people. And so I've known some ex-military contractors, and connecting the dots between what they say, there's definitely secret technology that is suppressed from the masses for various reasons. And I don't know all those reasons, but all I know is we're not getting everything. And some of these could even include something like free energy. And so this is not just a scientific discussion around suppressed technology, but it's also a humanitarian one, because you imagine if free energy exists, well, what could that do to, could that eradicate poverty overnight if we release that technology?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It would change the world overnight almost. There's no, first of all, was it Operation Northbridge? Is that the
Operation Northwoods is a
Northwoods? Okay.
Yeah, it was declassified or was accidentally declassified in 1997. None of the mainstream media reported on it, and the only person that stopped it is Kennedy. If it wasn't for him, all of his cabinet, all of his Joint Chiefs of Staff, they all were voting for this to create false terror and blame it on Castro, which is really scary. And I've actually had a conversation with one ex-CIA agent and one ex-NSA agent about this, and they just shrug it off as if, well, it didn't happen because Kennedy stopped it. But I said to them, well, if it didn't happen, what if are you saying these things crazy? They're saying that it's just like brainstorming, okay? They're saying funny ideas get passed around all the time, at elite military levels that never get passed. But it is on the record that Kennedy was the last line of defense. And so I put back to them, are you sure that there's not someone like a JFK always ready to do the right thing? Because if it went that far, something tells me, well, other terrorism probably did go ahead under government-sponsored terrorism, you know?
Right. Yeah, that document, Operation Northwoods,
yes.
that you quote. I mean, that's a fact. I mean, that document exists. It's out
yes.
there, right? And reading it, it's just mind-boggling. I mean, there you have it. Yeah, it's not. It was stopped. It was nipped in the bud. But the mere fact that it was being circulated at the highest levels in the military,
scary.
is just scary as all get out.
So, and I think I believe it's an eye-opener to how these people think at the elite levels. And once again, I believe 99% of governments, military are good people. It only takes a few bad eggs at the top, possibly someone like a Dick Cheney or whoever. But I believe Northwoods is a bit of an insight into how they look at, they look at some people as collateral damage in order they're aiming for a greater, they've got a greater goal in mind, and we're just pawns sometimes.
Right.
And then you could go forward to the Vietnam War. So it's now commonly accepted that the Gulf of Tonkin incident didn't happen as said, and it wasn't. The North Vietnamese were not attacking, and that's the incident that started the war, and that led to 60,000 U.S. lives lost and 3 million Vietnamese. And the NSA in 2005 said that this was another declassified in 2005. I don't know when it was written, but they said that it wasn't just that the Gulf of Tonkin was exaggerated; it was that there was no such attack. So when you've got an organization as biased as the NSA admitting that, well, that's a smoking gun right there. But unfortunately, because the mainstream can't conceive of a lot of these ideas, they remain conspiracy theory, even though really a fair chunk of what a fair chunk of what we're talking about here is conspiracy fact, which is a term I've sort of come up with to describe. It's a weird in between. It's been proven, but it remains conspiracy because they can't. We haven't received enough underground knowledge over the years to conceive of ideas like this. You see?
Right. The original story, which was a myth, somehow is still being maintained as the truth,
yes.
or at least in the mindset of many people.
And I guess Hollywood as well. When these things are embedded in our brains
right.
from a young age, that the North Vietnamese started this war or different things. It's hard to. That's embedded deep in the brain. It's hard to change your mind on that.
Right. I want to comment also. Reading your book, you quite a few times refer to John F. Kennedy's speech, April 27th, 1962, I believe. It was I think, before the American press. I think the American media
yes.
convention, and I don't know the exact organization's name, but I've always been an admirer of JFK. I always thought he was a great president, but honestly, I think we really. I think the world and the United States of America in particular would be a different place if he lived. I really believe that.
I agree.
I wasn't actually aware of that speech that he made, and I kept looking at it, and I realized how great he really was. I mean, he really wasn't a unique president. I mean, also along the lines, it's interesting to recall though that right before he was elected, Dwight Eisenhower. Right, I think before he left office, and in his farewell speech, talked about the military-industrial complex.
Absolutely.
So, something was in the air at that time. You can see something was in the air. Something was cooking. The truth was trying to get out. There were forces that were truly, humanitarian and truly patriotic in the most positive sense, and somehow it all came crashing down. That's what I think.
Yeah, I think on the note of JFK, like some of that would depend on what side of politics you believe in. But I think even for Republicans, I think you can sort of see there's something in JFK that transcended. I don't think JFK was perfect, and I think he came from one of the elite families at the time, and his father had even sided with the Nazis, and that's why he couldn't become president. But I think what happened is tremendous change happened within JFK while he was in office. You could see it, and by the end, he was number one, he was going to stop Vietnam. Number two, and I believe this could have been a bigger reason why he was dethroned, is he'd worked out that the Federal Reserve is a big problem with.
Yeah.
There's so much wealth in the U.S., but it's not getting to the people. He even knew that then, and the Federal Reserve being a privately owned institution, even though it says federal, there's nothing federal about it. It's not government owned at all. It's a central bank that's private. So he was trying to change that. And I think that one of those two things, either Vietnam or banking, is what upset the powers that be about him. And even if you don't believe JFK was assassinated by anyone other than Oswald, clearly there was a lot of people who wanted him out of office anyway. So it's still, it might have just been that Oswald got there first. You know what I mean? And then you go back to Eisenhower. Yes, he warned. He was the only president that's been a general, I believe, and he warned that the military-industrial. This is in 1961 as farewell speech. The military-industrial complex is getting far too big, and if we don't do anything about it, it's going to become a creature of its own, which is what I believe happened now.
Yeah. So anyway, at this particular time, we're going to take a quick break. And we'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned.
In Ethical Empowerment, Virtue Beyond the Paradigms, Arthur D. Schwartz presents an ethical theory that is a framework for evaluating moral conundrums that go beyond legalistic rulemaking, dogmatism, and preconditioned thinking. The book is as much an ethical framework for unconventional ideas as it is for staying with convention. Ethical Empowerment is a manifesto of non-doctrinaire perspective. Ultimately, the hypnotic thinking of ideology and dogmatism can only be overcome by returning to the true source and essence of morality, which is nothing less than universal love. Discover how the philosophically liberating approach of the ethical empowerment can be applied to the range of ethical, social, and political controversy. Read about a plan to eliminate all political parties. Entertain the possibility of an overhaul of the patent system and its replacement with a system that rewards inventors while eliminating monopolistic control of patents and technological suppression. Many other transformative ideas are discussed in the book, including issues related to the monetary system, real estate, scientific paradigms, and a rational approach to conspiracy theory. While ethical empowerment will challenge your mind to consider new perspectives, the ethical challenge is always to keep the diversity, depth, and breadth of perspective within the boundaries of love. Ethical Empowerment is available at Amazon.com and most online booksellers in both print and e-book editions. You are listening to Philosophic Perspectives on the Artist First Radio Network. Back to your host, Arthur D. Schwartz.
Well, welcome back, everybody. Thank you, Scott. This is such an interesting topic. I'm telling you, folks, there's so much in this book. The orphan conspiracy, so much. For me, it's almost, I'm sure it's not actually a textbook, but for me it's like a textbook because it's such a rich resource. I'm sure I'm going to return to it time and time again in my own, some of my own writing, which I plan to do further in this area, in similar subject areas. One of the things I want to talk about, James, is this Nazi kind of, the Nazis who, came to the U.S., came to, Soviet Union particularly, and I guess, those two, I think the U.S. and the Soviet Union got most of them. And, of course, getting the technology is one thing. I mean, that in of itself, you can't, everyone's going to want to get some of that technology. But obviously, it was much more insidious. And I think what you were saying in your book is that it's the fascist quality of these individuals that actually spread, took root in our country, and we may still be feeling that today. Is that a fair thing to say?
I think there's elements of fascism did cross over, and not just into the U.S., but all industrialized countries, and particularly Soviet Union, UK, America. It's a complicated one. I think Truman signed a document to say that Operation Paperclip would go ahead, but he put in the stipulation that there would be no war criminals, okay, and it would just be these scientists. But what they declassified documents since have shown that there was some serious war criminals who were major in the Holocaust, and that they had those particular paperclip scientists that were brought over to the U.S. They had their criminal record wiped clean, and they didn't go before Nuremberg trials or anything like that. So you're talking possibly the worst event in history in the Holocaust, and you've got these guys who are experimenting on live captives, and the Jews and the homosexuals and gypsies and whoever else was in the Holocaust, and they got ahead in terms of, say, like mind control and biological things. The Nazis got a big jump, because when you can experiment on live people, it's more advanced than experimenting on animals, which is only ever an approximation, as you know. So these ideas, when these people were set up and put in charge of things like Plum Island or mind control programs, then they just, if you take MKUltra, which is a CIA declassified mind control program, all fully acknowledged, that in the records there, the CIA admitted that there were, thousands of people were killed unnecessarily, that there were citizens didn't know they were being experimented on. And then to go further beyond what's been acknowledged, some people say it was responsible for what you call Manchurian candidates and people being assassinated, and people doing assassinations that they didn't know they were actually doing, because it's a part of their mind that's beyond that. So all these things are, the Nazi ideology is continued, even right down to looking for orphans, which is what they did in the Lebensborn program, and even before World War II, they were experimenting on orphans. So I believe it was that by the U.S. allowing these Nazis in, it wasn't just a little dirty secret. I believe it was moral corruption at that point, and it led to, and each one of those, so 15,000 that we know of came in, and not everything's been declassified. For all we know, Joseph Mengele, who was the notorious angel of death in the concentration camps and experimented on thousands of, right down to babies and twins and all sorts. For all we know, he was brought in undercover. We don't know the full extent of Operation Paperclip. So I do believe elements of fascism did carry forward, and these Nazis had a huge influence on our modern societies.
Yeah, and when you talk about the CIA's use of these technologies to, whether you're experimenting on humans or some of the brainwashing or mind controlling techniques that I guess there is hard evidence for. Certainly the experimentation, we know that's a fact. The thing is, it's very important, I think, for people to realize that some of the things in these conspiracy theories are not theories at all. Some of these things are just fact. I mean, we know about Tuskegee, right? We know about things like this.
Yeah.
This has actually happened, as no one is even disputing it. And yet, again, I'll go back to what I said before. Conspiracy theories to be laughed off. The notion that something like 9/11 could possibly be, at least in some level, an inside job. That
I'll tell you what I believe.
Yeah, go ahead. Right.
Why I believe these things are easily laughed off is because things are being studied in isolation. What I mean by that is, if you study one thing like war, and you could be an expert, and you could be an ex-general, and then you've studied that, and you've taught at university, and you know that inside out. Someone could say to me, well, that person could say to me, what do I know about war? I haven't been to war, But the problem is with some of these experts, they're only experts in that isolated field. And we're in the 21st century, everything influences everything else. So you've got, what we were talking about before about banking affects politics. And then, wars could be because of, you can go into, in the book we talk about the war on drugs and how that could be designed. It's more of a profit thing rather than stopping drugs. And I know a ex-CIA DEA spy called John Banks who's told me that he's served with Oliver North, people like that, and the CIA is the biggest drug runner in the world. But see, if you're just looking at wars, well, you wouldn't see those other, you haven't gone further afield. And I think one advantage independent researchers have is they can explore anything. And then you start, sometimes it's dangerous to connect dots because you're connecting things that's not there. But other times you see, well, okay, if that's causing that, then that, yeah, well, why wouldn't they be making $1 trillion off this war? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Well, connecting dots. I mean, yeah. There are. Once you start connecting dots, it becomes a theory to a degree. But the thing is, and what you've done very well is establish a body of factual evidence. And sure, when you to take that and then to create a sort of superstructure, a conspiracy that tie things together, then it is a theory. It's still theoretical, but you still have the facts. And so that's one of the things we talked about. Are there, a broad underlying conspiracy? Is there a global elite, Illuminati, New World Order, that kind of thing? That's something we could talk about. But wherever you come down on that, what really is most important is that there's enough evidence for any reasonable person, in my view, to take these things seriously. And that's what really matters. I mean, that's actually my particular thing is that conspiracy theories are just laughed off. They're not taken seriously, and yet it's unreasonable because there is evidence of severe wrongdoing.
Yeah, well, I mean, I prefer to use the term global elite than Illuminati or New World Order, which I think is missing a lot of nuances because it implies something like, in those bad B-grade movies, you'd have a world organization a secret world organization that's controlling everything, and they'd have a headquarters in somewhere like Geneva, Switzerland, and they'd have one button that would control. It's that sort of thinking. Whereas I prefer the global elite because that could imply, somewhere that could even include rising families and corporations and entities within new countries that are rising up like China and India, which don't even, that's Illuminati ideas are more Europe, which is it's a new world now. We're beyond that, and the global elite could also include conflicting groups that are actually working against each other. So they're all trying to dominate. They're all sort of striving for world domination, but the reason I think it is true of an overarching group. An overarching splinter group of the world, which is whether you call it the 1% of the global elite or whatever, I believe this is true because in terms of the rest of us, the common man, none of these groups, even if they're fighting with each other, none of them are looking out for us. In fact, most of them, I believe, are against us. They're not looking to redistribute the wealth. They're not looking to end homelessness. They're not looking to end extreme poverty. They're looking out for themselves. So from that perspective, from the common people's perspective, there is a global elite that we've got to bring to the fore and seek out and name.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I think what you're alluding to is, I think why you favor the term global elite, and I agree. It refers to a natural occurrence. It's the way the world works, that people tend to work with each other where they for mutual benefit. And so when you're talking about the super rich and the super powerful, and those in position of great power, that there naturally becomes coalitions, and that's not necessarily the typical notion of a conspiracy, but it in all practical intents and purposes becomes it, because it's just a way of things, and in fact, in the corporate world, interlocking directorates, what is that? You're just having companies are being bound together, and because of mutual interest, and it can become just and that's legal. But the idea is that people are going to bond together for self-interest. Now there's nothing wrong with that. That's psychology. That's nature. The thing is, when does it become criminal and subterfuge? And so,
well, I'll give you an example. In the United States, there's the Logan Act, and that says that no elected U.S. official can meet in secret and discuss policy. So the operative phrase in that is discuss policy, okay? Now, if you take the Bilderberg Group, which is one of many of these, there's the Bohemian Club, there's the Council on Foreign Relations, these are all elitist groups. What happens with the Bilderberg Group is they meet in secret. It's not open to journalists. It's royalty, bankers, the media, people like Rupert Murdoch from the media, and elected politicians. Clintons were there, people like that, Tony Blair. But when these people meet in secret, what are they going to be? Officially, the way the U.S. because the U.S. is the only country that has this rule that you can't discuss policy in secret away from Congress and so on. So they're the ones that what the U.S. officials say is, no, we're not discussing policy. But what are these people going to discuss at an event like this? What are these powerful, the world's movers and shakers going to be? Are they going to be discussing what time we play golf, what to eat for dinner? No, when you get people like this together, they're going to be discussing policies, and they're going to find mutual causes.
That's actually fascinating. I'm actually not. I heard of that law before. That's an American law where you cannot discuss. Say that again. Now you can't discuss.
You can't discuss policy. I think it's actually you can't discuss policy with foreign officials in secret, something like that. But it's definitely that you can't do it. You can't be. You can meet with them, but you can't be discussing policy.
I see. Well, that's fascinating because, one level I hear that, I say, well, someone who believes in free speech, why can't you do anything, talk to anybody on some level? But the point being that if that law exists, that's almost a confession by the Congress of the United States who passed it, that this is fertile ground for conspiracies. And you're saying that the U.S. is the only country that has this law?
Yeah, right? the U.S., because of the Constitution, and that has the best laws for these things. But it's when people say to me the U.S. is the most corrupt, I don't agree, because it's got the best founding principles. But the problem is there's so much money. A lot of the big corporations are there that in the end you do get the most corruption. And so it's sort of by mistake, but they've got these sort of rules, like here in Australia, or British officials goes, there's nothing, they can do whatever they want. They can sign agreements with foreign politicians in private if they want. So it's a good rule, but unfortunately there's no real way to enforce it because we don't know what they discuss.
Right, but what I'm saying, right. But what I'm saying is that the mere fact that law exists actually is a statement. If you think about it, it's a statement. The law itself states that this is dangerous, you might say, conspiratorial territory. So we have a law, this country has a law, the United States has a law, but all the other countries don't. And so therefore, almost, if you look at it, it's basically the law is stating exactly the kind of conspiratorial development, organizational, development that can spring from that. And so therefore, if all the countries in the world, and, the United States is, well, they're not the only country who has the conspiracies, obviously, and so it basically acknowledges exactly what you're saying, that this is going on, and you have people of power talking, negotiating policy, and there are Americans doing it. They have to do it undercover, but the citizens of other countries don't have to worry about that, and so therefore, because they don't have to worry about that, and because enough Americans are probably doing it anyway, you have actually a definition of conspiracy, of worldwide global conspiracy embodied in the law itself, in terms of a description of what it is.
I mean, I've just this is going by memory, but I'm pretty sure that law came in 1976. Mm-hmm. So the Bilderberg Group was 54, Council on Foreign Relations about the same time. Mm-hmm. But I don't believe that I don't believe this idea that the Bilderberg Group is the world government. Once again, that lacks nuance. Mm-hmm. It doesn't include. I just think that would be one element of it. But there is a global lead, and I believe when you mentioned before about wealthy people, I don't believe the Forbes rich lists are the richest people.
Right.
I think there's a hidden system of finance in the world, and one confirmation I've had of this. I've had some contacts from the Philippines who knew Ferdinand Marcos, the president of the Philippines, from 66 to 86.
Right.
And there was an interesting thing with World War II. There was the treasure called Yamashita's treasure, which the Japanese were hoarding all the gold from all over Asia, a bit like the Nazis did throughout Europe. They looted it all. But this was on a scale unparalleled, and also the Queen was worried that her gold was going to be overtaken by the Nazis because they were bordering ready to invade England. It looked like, for all intents, that was going to happen. So she was worried about losing her gold. So it was all shipped to Singapore, which was a British territory at the time. And the rumor is that the Japanese got that as well. So we're talking possibly tens of trillions of dollars in today's currency worth of gold. All of this, the Japanese were storing in the Philippines, which is fairly close to Japan, for transshipment to Japan. But then when the Allies gained the routes, the Allies started to take control later in the war of all the submarine routes and so on. What happened is that they had to bury all this gold in the Philippines.
Right.
And the idea is that post-World War II, Ferdinand Marcos combined with the CIA collected...
I want you to hold right there, because we're going to break now, but I want you to come back, because this is probably a really fascinating thing that we can sort of, kind of take it to the end of the show. This whole incredible network of wealth that you say, basically in the book, the wealth of Bill Gates, for example, is like, I don't know, chump change compared to what you're talking about. That's really an interesting subject. I think we're going to really take that further. So we're going to take another break. We'll be back just a couple minutes.
Are you a person who enjoys intellectual social interaction and finds digging deeper into the nature of things, from big issues to everyday life, an important part of the pleasure of life? Social Philosophizers is a Boston area social club for those who desire intellectual socializing. It's a club for both singles and non-singles, and for anyone who finds intellectually mingling to be the best form of social mingling. The club offers a variety of interesting venues, such as philosophical get-togethers in private venues, book discussions concerning literature and philosophy, topical discussions over brunch or dinner, guest speakers, theater, after-work mixers, even long philosophical ruminations along nature trails or city streets, and more. If you live in the greater Boston area or occasionally spend time in the area, you can choose a cost-effective membership level that's right for you. Basic membership is free. Find the link on Arthur's Philosophical Perspectives show page at artistfirst.com or just search socialphilosophizers.com. We hope you'll join Social Philosophizers today. That's socialphilosophizers.com. Thanks for joining us on Philosophic Perspectives on the Artist First Radio Network. Back to your host, Arthur Schwartz.
Hi there. How are you doing? Hope you're enjoying the show. James, my guest James Morcan, started talking about this secret wealth that occupies, a good part of the book. It's kind of one of those intertwining themes that goes throughout, It's really fascinating. I must say, I didn't know too much about it. So I'd like James to kind of continue where he left off and again, kind of state the magnitude of it, of what it is accused of being, and then we'll kind of finish off and speculate about what the world might be like if that wealth was shared more than it is now.
Redistributed. Yeah.
Redistributed.
I think basically I don't believe in the 99% versus the 1%. I think it's more like the 0.0001%. Okay?
Right.
It's I don't think even people like Branson and that, I think that's just, we shouldn't pick on, those are entrepreneurs. Yes, they should pay the right taxes, but there's so many undeclared fortunes in the world. And just what I was basically saying with this Yamashita's treasure is that I've had it confirmed from certain Filipino contacts I've had that were high level in the Marcos regime, that they saw it with their own eyes, the amount of gold that was being shipped in and out, and in collaboration with the CIA. And then I've had other spies who have told me the same thing, ex-spies told me the same thing, that they were the US and British spies were there working on that operation. So that's one confirmation that secret wealth exists. Now, the British tabloid press has also ran articles on the Queen saying that she's probably could be the wealthiest person in the world, because you've got fortunes going way back to the black nobility and the slave trade that Forbes has got no way of estimating how much the royals have, and they ain't saying. They've got bank accounts all over the world in offshore locales. They aren't saying, but some have even estimated the Queen as worth between 10 and 20 trillion, which would be 100 times more than and that's the Queen and the Windsors as well, I guess. But that's that. And then there's people like arms traders like Adnan Khashoggi or Victor Boot, Victor Boot was the inspiration for the movie Lord of War, starring Ethan Hawke and Nicolas Cage, and that showed him being just having almost infinite wealth and can buy any law he wants. Now a lot of these, not all of these things are proven, but the rumors are circulating out there that this is the situation, and most of the billionaire community commonly acknowledge that Forbes rich lists are just very basic estimates, and the elite don't go out of their way to say, and then beyond that, the final element of this secret wealth would be the elite banking families as well. So the Rockefellers and that if they've got elements of ownership of the Federal Reserve, for example, well, their wealth has got to be beyond Bill Gates and so on. And then, so taking all that forward, if there is a hidden system of wealth there, then my belief is there's more than enough wealth in the world to fix so many of our problems. And what I want to see an honest journalist sit in front of a politician and just say, stop, please. We've had enough of this charade. Why don't, instead of telling us we can't afford universal health care, or we can't fix the homeless, or we can't eradicate poverty, why don't you be honest and tell us, no, it's not our top priority. We'd rather have annual multi-trillion budgets on war to keep that machine going, or we'd rather bail out privately owned banks, which is what happened in the GFC, remember? We'd rather bail out privately owned banks ahead of individuals who are facing eviction from their homes. So I believe what I want to see is real journalist return, because I'm not seeing it at all.
Right. Well, I'm one for believing that we do have enough wealth to certainly end world hunger, particularly in our age of transportation and communication, like we didn't have not too many, 100 years ago certainly, and less than that even. And so we really can distribute food anywhere. There's warfare that's causing issues and so forth. But I do believe, even before becoming aware of your arguments here, that we have enough money in the world to basically solve poverty and lack of opportunity, for all. I mean, I think there will always be people who, will be wealthier than others, and that's a good thing, I think. But it's just that what's not fair or not just is the misery that is existing in the world because of hunger, poverty, and lack of ability to, get access to our modern healthcare system and so forth and so on. However, so this whole question about the wealth, though, it's really interesting, because one of those things I don't know what to say about it. I mean, it's mind-boggling. I think it's the one thing here that you want to think about. No, is this actually real or not? Because. For example,
I think once again it's not an isolation, though.
Right.
I think it's
right.
If you take other ideas like, okay, look at somewhere like Area 51.
Right.
Look at what they're doing. Look at all the black budgets, all that. Even if it's not what I'm talking about, which I admit, until I see things with my own eyes, I don't believe anything 100%. Okay, right. But I've formed conclusions, but I wouldn't bet my life on almost anything I'm saying here. But there's other examples of all the black budgets, all the things that come out, all the military-industrial complex spending. Then if you believe in suppressed technology, well, how much does all that take?
Which I do, by the way.
Yeah, and then even, ain't it great that we can fly probes to Mars and so on, but we can't, the people are still waiting for their food stamps, or or insurance won't pay out their medical bill and so on. So I believe it is time for honesty. It's just not a priority for the people in power to fix these things.
Well, I think that's certainly sadly true. I mean, I think it's obvious in some respects. I mean, look at this. In the United States of America, I mean, we have national health care. I don't know how good it is or how workable it is right now, but the thing is, what's the problem? I mean, we're the only country in the world that didn't have a national. I mean, the only advanced country in the world that didn't have any.
That's correct.
Until very recently, and then ours is just getting off the ground. And it's amazing. I mean, part of this is, yes, a political system and blockages that impede justice, but also some of it is perhaps just unfortunately, the moral weakness, the lack of moral development or evolution that allows this to happen. I mean, when I was when during the political campaign, I guess it was the last political campaign, when President Obama was coming out with his health care plan, and just the tirade, all the anger, that it was just. I mean, it's one thing I just can't get. I mean, people were concerned about keeping their doctor, the particular doctor, and the fact that you have other people, they either don't get help, or if they do get help, they're broke for the rest of their lives, because the American system is obscenely expensive. It's obscenely, ridiculously expensive.
I don't think we can't treat our citizens like this and then call ourselves civilized. That's another area we've got to be honest.
So I need a more. So my thing is, it's a kind of a moral depravity, as well as perhaps an economic depravity, and they kind of work together.
And possibly even corporatocracy, like the idea that all these elected officials are promising certain what do you call it when they donate? Those who donate to their political campaigns. Mm-hmm. So let's say a big pharma company donates to Obama. Mm-hmm. Well, that donation doesn't come for free. He's promising certain things, even if it's just a handshake agreement.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we're getting near the end. I was just wondering. One thing we didn't talk about too much is the medical-industrial complex, which that is, I kind of alluded to that the general issue of medical care, but that is also equally insidious, and and
I mean that's not really a conspiracy theory. It's most doctors are acknowledging it now. It's just a huge problem with big pharma being so rich that they can buy evidence to get a drug released. You know.
Right.
They can buy scientists. It's just the level of corruption there is unbelievable.
Yeah, it really is, and there seems to be no incentive to develop cures if there's no profit, which in and of itself is oxymoronic when you think about it. That's another maybe a topic for another day, but the idea that profit can be the single motivation for development, because sometimes it just doesn't work. You know.
It's. I mean, I'm essentially a capitalist. I'm not a socialist, but I believe it's the best of a bad bunch, probably, of all the economic systems.
I agree.
And I think profit can drive. There are moral companies. There are moral elite businessmen.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it needs the people to monitor all this.
Right.
And when you take them out of the picture, when they don't have a voice, you've just got huge corporate machines, and that's what you call unregulated capitalism.
Right. Well, unfortunately, we're just about at the end of the show, James. This has been really interesting to me, and I really hope you can come again to join me in this show and talk more about all these different subjects that you work with. And, I want to just let everyone know that I think your main website is Morkan Books and Films, Morkan Books and Films.com.
Yes.
And you'll find all of the links to his books, his novels, his newly non-fictional series. What's it called?
Underground Knowledge.
Underground Knowledge, which is basically, I think, a further extrapolation of the orphan conspiracies. And so it's really interesting. I encourage you all to take a look at it and perhaps buy a copy or two. So I want to thank James Morkan, James, for joining me today. And so this does conclude tonight's broadcast. For links to my book, Ethical Empowerment, my philosophical counseling and hypnotherapy practice, and the Social Philosophizers Club, please visit arthurdschwartz.com. And this is Arthur D. Schwartz reminding you to live well and think deeply. Until next time, good night, everybody.